Alrighty, hello everybody. Jason Reynolds here with the Real Estate Now podcast. So excited to have you guys here and really excited. Today is going to be our second podcast with an actual live example of a property with our client, Leo Wiita, on the other end there. We had the chance to sell his townhouse here in the DFW Metroplex. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to run through the quick numbers on this property. Then we'll introduce Leo, get to visit with him for a few minutes, and ask him about his property and his experience in rehabbing it and what he might do differently or not do differently. So just a quick overview. This property was in Irving, was also in Irving ISD, decent school district. It looks like it was purchased in 2004, purchased for about $95,000. Interest rate on that was unknown, but did have a mortgage on it. And what we did this year is Leo reached out to our team. We did a rehab project on this particular property, and we closed on it for $153,000. The rehab total came to roughly $22,000. So net sales price of roughly $130,000. Took us about 37 days to do the rehab on this property. Was on the market 4 days. And we had maybe just like one or two showings, or let me look at my notes, 42 actually, that's a pretty high number. So if we crunch all the numbers, it actually shows an appreciation based on the net sales price after rehab of about 37.6%. So it was appreciating about 3% per year if, again, you're taking out that rehab cost. On the lease amount, when Leo purchased it, we're not sure on that exact number, but it was leased at $1,150 prior to the tenant vacating. So again, some really interesting numbers. And if you remember our last example, it's really interesting to see how different properties perform. But let's talk to Leo and learn a little bit more about the property. Leo, great to have you on.
Well, it's nice to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. So those that are new, that are listening, they don't know this, but you are actually a real estate agent. Are you a broker too in California, or just an agent right now?
No, just an agent here in California, yes.
And how long have you been in the real estate field?
Wow, I'd say around 2006 as an agent. I've been doing real estate investing since 1980.
Okay. So just a few years.
Yeah, quite a few, yeah. Good and bad, yeah.
Well, if you could tell us a little bit, touch on this property in terms of how you bought it, but maybe an overview of your investing experience and what maybe led to purchasing this property, what your portfolio looks like, what you like to invest in.
Okay, well, it's interesting because we bought this one, we actually bought two the same day. As you know, this unit and the unit right beside it, through a local investor who was working with your sister company, Frontline. Well, actually, it was Visions at the time that came out here and did the presentation. So we went to the presentation and we were looking for investment properties and ended up buying both of them. And at that time, back in 2004, both making good salaries, we bought quite a few properties around that time frame. But the numbers looked good. And, we knew Dallas was a good market based on the investor out here who was, he did a lot of research ahead of it for us. So the numbers looked good. And so we went for it.
Perfect.
And we started with just when you're talking about the interest rate on a loan, we started with one of the Washington Mutual option arms.
Okay.
One of the 4 options every month. So it gave us the ability, if there was cash flow wasn't that good, or if we had any maintenance issues going on, we could go to the lowest payment that they offered you and still be able to, make the payment and keep things rolling. But it worked out well. We actually, as when we just sold the property, that was still the same loan.
Really?
We just kept that loan, and it just eventually some of the options rolled away after enough time, but pretty much the same loan and taken over by Chase. And it worked out well.
Well, good. So then, in terms of selling the property, you reached out to us and asked us to provide a CMA, run our different, scenarios that were a possibility. From your experience, what are things that really helped you in making a decision to sell? Why did you decide to sell? And then can you talk a little bit about things you might do differently or that you wouldn't?
Yeah, the reason to sell was a few. Number one being make my wife happy. Number
Good
two
goal.
was, just a lot of stuff going on. Like I said, we've been a real estate investor since 1980. And, just time to start kind of getting rid of stuff and relaxing a little more. And then with the pandemic and the election, just so much going on, we just said, let's just simplify. And so that was mainly the reason.
Okay.
Not that it wasn't cash flowing or wasn't doing okay, just time to cash out and kind of change course in life a little bit.
Okay. Now, what were typically for those of you that are listening, when we run a cost benefit analysis, we're giving a rough idea of what a rehab cost is, and then trying to figure out if it is even worth the money to, go ahead and invest additional funds. And on this particular rehab, I know there were a few items that popped up unexpectedly, or maybe were choice options. I think there were 2 front doors to this house right next to each other, essentially. So
yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. Yeah, 2 front doors, which we took one and converted to a window, which brought more light into the living room area and got rid of that weird second door, and to me made the property much more desirable.
Agreed. And that's one thing that we're seeing in the current market is when you're deciding between 2 things, if you're wanting the property again to get 42 showings, doing the small things like that to help buyer perception ended up benefiting long term, as opposed to trying to maybe pinch pennies. And I know she didn't necessarily, I think you decided to maybe save in certain areas and not in others. So what were those things on buyer perception that you decided, like the window, you thought, okay, I'll go ahead and spend the money to do this?
Well, just trying to, because that living room area in that corner was dark, and if you had the door still there, when you opened the door, there was an unusable corner. So just to make it more of a usable living room, bigger space for them to put their furniture in. And then all the rest of it, with the countertops and the cabinets and everything that we did, just making it, clean it up and fluff it to make it look like a really nice home, which it really, really did come out nice. So just really cleaning it up so it was appealing to more buyers.
Yeah. For those of you listening, we'll post some before and after photos so you can actually take a look before and after, because it is quite different.
Yeah, and you and I had a nice conversation about that as it sat, it had been a rental for a long time and we didn't do a lot of upgrades in it, or the minimal, let's say.
Right.
What we could have got for a purchase price would have been much lower and the yield wouldn't have been as good. So.
Right. Now, if you could go back to when we were either right before the rehab or during the rehab, is there anything you would have done differently, or are there things that you think, yes, I'm really glad that we did that?
I don't think we would have changed much. I mean, if you think about the time frame, we did it in, you said 37 days or something like that, 7 weeks or whatever. But I think the only delay to the project was waiting for appliances and parts and things. It wasn't really anything that we would have not done. I think we've always thought of all of our properties that we've ever owned over the years that we make them look like we would want to live in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this one, in order to sell it, we wanted to make it look like somebody would want to move in and live there.
And it certainly did.
Yeah, it looked good.
Well, perfect. Well, Leo, we truly appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. And for those of you that are listening, again, we'll post the photos before and after. We'll post these numbers so you can get an idea. But we like providing current examples of what's going on in the Dallas-Fort Worth market for you guys to get kind of a pulse of what's actually happening. So again, Leo, thank you so much. And maybe we'll talk sometime again soon.
You're welcome. Yep, I hope so. Take care.